Hola a todos, qué bueno saludarlos de nuevo. Yo soy Dani Mora, quien les acompaña en este proyecto, y hoy tendremos la oportunidad de volver o de revisitar algunos conceptos o perspectivas básicas de la teoría de la terapia gestáltica. Hoy nuestro tema girará en torno a convertirse en persona a través del diálogo, la teoría del campo revisitada. Para esto nos va a estar acompañando Friedemann Schulz desde Estados Unidos. Él es terapeuta gestáltico certificado y durante muchos años se desempeñó como presidente de la Facultad del Instituto Gestáltico del Pacífico. Fue además presidente del Instituto Gestáltico de Los Ángeles y enseñó en el programa de posgrado de la Antioch University. Es supervisor de profesionales de la salud mental desde hace mucho tiempo y también es instructor principal de una disciplina corporal japonesa. Ha realizado talleres en los Estados Unidos, Alemania, México y Perú que se basan en las filosofías orientales y principios contemporáneos de la terapia Gestalt. Entonces, nuevamente revisitemos estos conceptos generales y veamos qué tiene Friedemann Schulz para compartir con nosotros. Que disfruten, por supuesto, de esta entrevista. Bueno, hoy tenemos una nueva entrevista de la mano de Friedemann Schulz, donde vamos a estar hablando un poco de convertirse en persona a través del diálogo, la teoría del campo revisitada. Creo que es importante siempre volver a revisar un poco más la teoría de campo, y hoy te tenemos acá, Friedemann. ¿Cómo estás?
Thank you very much, and thanks for inviting me.
Bueno, entonces comenzamos con las preguntas. Bien, la primera pregunta que tengo para usted, todo basado en ese artículo que me envió para efectos de esta entrevista, es ¿cómo se traduce u operacionaliza la teoría de campo que nació de las ciencias naturales en una aplicación clínica para la psicoterapia?
Yeah, thank you. I mean, that's a big question that actually would take for the next hour, probably. But maybe I'll start with the second question that I read, and then work my way to this last one, which is that because it's been, in my experience, it has been difficult for students of Gestalt therapy to bring the notions of field theory into the clinical situation. I think the ideas about field theory were a little bit too distant or not experience near enough for students to really integrate it into their approach to psychotherapy. And the reason for that, I think, is that we have been sort of trying to wrestle the natural science, the physics idea of field theory into psychology. And that has not been easy, I think. So many writers in 30, 40 years ago, etc., they have been trying to translate field theory into psychology by coming up, for example, with certain principles, that we can take from field theory as we know it in physics to psychology. Right? For example, there's a principle of possible relevance, and which says that we don't know beforehand what is relevant in a psychotherapeutic situation. We have to kind of consider the whole field and not right away create a hierarchy of what is important, what is not important. That's just one principle that sort of came out of the translation into psychology. And those principles have been useful, but I think we try too hard sometimes to align the psychological notions and what is important in psychotherapy with field theory, how we heard about it and read about it in physics. But that has sort of changed in the last, I would say, 20, 30 years. And there's more an acceptance now, or the idea of what is really relevant for psychotherapy is the phenomenal field, the field of human experiencing. And so my question to myself has been, how can we then bring that notion into psychotherapy? Right? I think what is generally accepted that the most direct application of field theory would be the dialogic method, Martin Buber's dialogic method. But how that happens, in my paper, I try to bring in my ideas how we can connect these two. Right? That was my hope, that I could make that connection. Are we good so far?
I was telling Danny that we're talking about the dialogical method, but it would be important to our listeners, and even to me, to know what you mean by that, just to get the notion or the idea of what do you mean by dialogical method.
Oh, I see. Okay. Gestalt therapy theory is based on three main theories. One is the phenomenology, one is field theory, and one is the dialogic Martin Buber's dialogic theory. Right? And Martin Buber's dialogic theory is actually something that is the easiest for new students of Gestalt therapy to implement, think about, and bring into the clinical situation. So, do you want me to talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, that would be fun, especially if you say that it's the easiest one out of all the three theories you mentioned, that it's easy to bring into the practice. Right. Clinical practice.
Well, Martin Buber was a scholar and a philosopher. Last century, he started writing at the beginning of the 20th century, and his most famous book is called, in German, it's called Ich und Du, and in English, it's translated in I and Thou. And that's a fairly well-known book for folks who have been interested in philosophy and especially in Gestalt therapy. Martin Buber was very interested in interhuman relationships, and he also had a lot of ideas about what makes us human. For example, one of his famous phrases is, there is no I, no me, without the other. The translation might be, there is no sense of who I am without the community that I'm growing out of. Right? And in a way, that's sort of the punchline of this whole thing of my paper, which is that since we're born out of human relationships, healing also occurs through relationship. That was also Martin Buber's idea. Another phrase that he often uses is that healing, psychological healing, can occur through meeting. What facilitates what he calls a meeting, that is what he came up with, that is the dialogic method. The dialogic method is an idea about how to most effectively meet with another person and engage with another human being. And the dialogic method includes three aspects. One is called inclusion, which basically is about like an empathic attunement to the other person. we can maybe talk about that a little bit more, but to get to know the meaning world of the other person. The second one is called presence. The second aspect of the dialogic method is called presence, and presence is usually translated in bringing one the choices we're making as psychotherapists to bring ourselves into the dialogue. Martin Buber felt that in order for a meeting to occur, each partner in dialogue needs to be present authentically. That in psychotherapy, if you translate it just into psychotherapy, that can be a little bit tricky because, of course, a psychotherapist, for example, issues like personal disclosure is a little tricky, right? We want to use our reactions, our expressions, our engagement in the best way possible for the therapy, right? To make it as useful as possible for the client. So, as psychotherapists, we have to modulate or be aware of our reactions and, in our judgment, what would be the best way to bring ourselves into the dialogue. That's the challenge of presence.
Yeah, but how to understand authenticity here? You mentioned that one of the requirements is to be authentically present.
Right. As I'm trying to enter the client's meaning world, the client's sense of how they're operating in the world, right? Once I'm trying to understand that, I will, of course, have reactions, thoughts, feelings, physical reactions to my client, right? I have ideas, I have feelings, etc. So, as a clinician, I have to make judgments of how to best serve my client and bring in these ideas that I have, or these feelings, or various thoughts into the dialogue. Right? I don't have to make up things. I shouldn't make up things. I have to be there as a real person. On the other hand, different clinical situations need modulation of how much I'm bringing myself into it.
That's
okay.
That's perfect. Okay, so I believe that these take us to the third question in our in the
yes, the third aspect of I'm not sure if that's what you meant, but the third aspect of dialogic theory is called commitment to dialogue.
Okay.
And commitment to dialogue has to do with that we are not aiming for a specific outcome with the client, but we are committed to the process of engagement. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Bien. Okay. Entonces, haciendo referencia a todo esto, ¿de qué manera estas tres perspectivas, la fenomenología, la teoría de campo y el método dialógico, brindan un apoyo práctico en su práctica clínica? ¿Nos podría dar incluso algunos ejemplos que puedan esbozar un poquito estos tres aspectos, fundamentos y demás?
Well, let me start with phenomenology. One aspect of phenomenology is the study of how the world appears to us. Right? It has to do with the present experience of a human being. That's an important aspect of my interaction with clients, that all of our current experience is rooted in the present. Right? For example, if I'm talking to a client and she tells me that about some difficult problems in her childhood, right? So, of course, we talk about that. I try to best understand what she remembers, how the situation was for her, what was the family culture, let's say. How was she affected by her growing up, right? She will be affected by telling her story to me. I'm affected how she tells me her story, right? And even though I want to understand her memories and ideas about what happened in her past, but I would then, for example, check in with her. What is it like for you to tell me this story right now? Right? To bring us into the present. Right? What is relevant right now for you about this story that happened in the past? What about it is meaningful? Right? And that's this idea that everything sort of centers in present experience. That has to do with phenomenology, the whole ideas of how we human beings experience. Make sense? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, field theory. So that's an important thing for Gestalt therapists, right? That we kind of center ourselves or ground ourselves in current experiencing ongoingly as we are with our client. We might go into the future, hopes or fears about events down the road, or something in the past that happened a day ago or 10 years ago. But we want to ground ourselves about, okay, what is that like right now as we're discussing these things in the present? So that's the link to phenomenology. Field theory is a little trickier, I think. In my paper, I made this point that as human beings, we are emerging as persons through social interaction. That happens through language, of course. We all acquire a language through the interactions that we have in our early upbringing. And suddenly we are a speaker of German, English, Spanish, etc., right? And then we discover that our thinking is done in language, right? So our ability to communicate with words, but also our ability to think, has to do with the social interactions that we grew out of, which is a big chunk of who we are, right? How we think, how we talk. But it's not only language that is important to communication, right? There's a lot of things that happen without verbal communication. There's a lot of non-verbal communication that happens, right? Like through our facial expressions, through our gestures or body movement, etc. But all of these aspects of communication, language or nonverbal, they have to do with something significant in the to a person that's communicating it, right? Some aspect, objects, people in the world, some ideas, etc., feelings, fears and hopes, etc. All of that is sort of communicated in some ways through verbal and nonverbal means. And I call that the meaning world. So a child is not only becoming part of a speaking world, the child also grows up into a meaning world. And the meaning world includes things like, what is the right thing to do? What is a good person? What is shameful? What is enjoyable? What are we striving for, etc. Right? All of these ideas that make up our lives, we get our first impression, our first information through the family culture or our caregiver culture. Of course, we're entering other meaning worlds by extended family, by circle of friends, by school, by work, etc., right? So our meaning worlds become more complex, and our ability to navigate the social interactions becomes more sophisticated. So the main point about that is that, as I mentioned, Buber was saying earlier, there is no I, there's no me without the other. That's sort of the explanation for that, right? We're becoming persons through social interactions, through the worlds that we're growing into, and we're trying to, best as we can, navigate our lives in the world, right? Through the means that we have, our bodies, but also through the learnings that we have acquired through our entering various levels of meaning worlds. This learning happens so we can live our lives as best as possible, right? We can orient ourselves in human community and in the world. But it doesn't always work so well. And Martin Buber's idea was also that all of the issues that bring the clients into our office are having to do with something not working well in the meaning worlds that the person is part of or participating in. So the long and the short of the whole thing is that we becoming the person who we are through social interactions, through the relational processes that we're going through. And in order to recalibrate ourselves, in order to heal, that's Martin Buber's idea of healing through meeting. And we will have to go through relational processes for that to happen. So that's how field theory applies to psychotherapy, right? Psychotherapy is a specific, focused interaction, engagement that focuses on exploration of what is working in your life, what is not so working so well. How can we understand that the best way, right? I mentioned that in the paper that there are social scientists who exploring this idea of how human engagement can be beneficial, right? And one of those principles that they came up with is participatory sense making. Participatory sense making, and with that phrase, they try to describe psychotherapy. That's another way to maybe say dialogic engagement. In Gestalt therapy, we would say dialogic engagement. But participatory sense making is just another term in which both parties are participating to make sense of what happened in their lives and what is not working so well and how they can maybe go on. So that's sort of how field theory moves into the clinical situation, I think.
Y antes de continuar con el método dialógico, para mí sí sería importante saber algo porque aparece mucho en el contexto educativo, y es que ¿cuáles considera que son las principales razones por las que la teoría de campo resulta tan difícil de asimilar para los terapeutas y de enseñar para los formadores en terapia Gestalt?
I think it's I think that as in our current cultures, we're still influenced by 18th, 19th century thinking. And in a way that we're still struggling with this idea of people are individual objects in the world, and or what we oftentimes call here like an individualistic mindset. I don't think that's so prevalent in let's say, in Eastern philosophies or Eastern ways of thinking, but in cultures that are influenced by Western ideas, I think this notion of that we're all separate individual people is still a very strong underlying notion of who we are as people. And this idea that we are so mutually influencing all the time, that, for example, our self-identity or a sense of self is actually just an experience, is not something that's located within our bodies or something like that. That's still something that I think we're struggling with as a culture, that we're coming to terms with. So I think that's one of the reasons why field theory is a little difficult to grasp.
Bien, y de acuerdo con su artículo titulado Convertirse en persona a través del diálogo, que allí mismo lo despliega, pero me gustaría lo hiciera acá, ¿qué considera que posibilita a los seres humanos convertirse en personas y crear todo el mundo de significados?
Yeah, this is what I was trying to explain a little earlier, right? That we're becoming, of course, we're having, when we are born, we have bodies. And our bodies, with enough sufficient care, will develop and etc. Right? But who we are as persons is determined through our social interaction. So, in general, social interaction makes us become the person that we will be. That is not just childhood, that is an ongoing process. Because a personhood is not something that we acquire and then we have it and then that's finished. It's a slow process, as, for example, learning a language is a process, or as having sort of the sense of what the world is about, or who am I in the world, is a process. But it's never finished. And changing all the time. When I came to the United States, I was in my mid-20s, and I had the idea, I wanted to do a certain kind of therapy that I heard about at that time. And I thought, okay, I'm coming for 6 months to the United States, and then I'm going to go home, and all my problems are done, right? Okay, so that was my notion in my 20s. And then I realized, okay, well, I need to learn more, or I need to maybe to stay here for 12 months or something like that, right? And after 12 months, I had not just therapy experiences, but I entered a new culture, I met new people, I learned a new language, and all that was a very rich experience that I felt, okay, I need to have more of that. And now, 47 years later, I'm still in the place, right? So the reason why I was bringing this up is that just as an example that I can look back, and I'm sure that's true for you, how we were 10 years ago, 20 years ago, and how we have changed over time, right? And my point being basically being a person is an ongoing process and experience, right? There was an article many years ago in the Los Angeles Times that was based on a piece of research. And the research was, the question was done in the research is, or the result of the research was that people could accept that they changed from the past to where they are now. But they could not, or had a harder time accepting that they will change in the future. And the idea was that when we are in our present experience, we feel like that's it. This is me. This is the Friedemann, the person, the Johnny, the Danny, right? That we are now, and that is it, right? And to imagine that we will change to a great degree down the road is harder to understand than to imagine that we are, oh yeah, of course, I'm a little bit different. I'm thinking a little bit different. I feel a little bit different in a way that I did 20 years ago, right? So, but it is a similar idea to a sense of identity or sense of self. Like 19th century thinking, the self and soul, they were kind of like one thing almost, right? But we're coming to understand that self is just an experience, right? It's an experience that is not some kind of a sort of a personal essence or somewhere located in the body. It is just an ongoing experience of being self-aware, let's say. I'm not sure if that answers your question, but
Ya.
It answers the question, and it's a very interesting answer.
Bien, y por último, quiero pasar a esta pregunta que me parece muy importante y que plantea en ese mismo texto. ¿Qué quiere decir con que los terapeutas se convierten en una especie de sustitutos del mundo, lo que permite explorar el campo fenoménico del cliente y el por qué parecen aferrarse a formas fijas, no saludables o autodestructivas de afrontar ciertas situaciones?
well, it's the idea that human relationships change us, right? Or relational processes have an effect on us, and they change us. Or another way to say it is that we cannot be not affected by experiences that we have in relationships. We were affected, of course, when we are small, babies, toddlers, children, etc. We are very much affected by those relationships, almost kind of imprinting in some ways. But we are affected all through our lives through the relationships that we are part of. Psychotherapy is a very specific relationship, right? It is first a relationship that's based on the need of the client. It is focused on what would help, what would be the most beneficial for the therapy. And it's a focused exploration of the client's way of being in the world. Many aspects of a client's way of being is working well for them, or well enough. But there are certain ways in how they see the world and themselves, how they see other people, that is not working well for them. So since the assumption is that what is not working well is kind of is born out of the relational world that the client emerged from, that a new relationship that is focused on this exploration has the potential to shape, to change the client's own way of being. That's the idea, right?
Oh, okay.
Is that, am I answering the question or leaving something out?
Oh, I think you're answering the question. Yes.
Y usted ha puesto en el artículo un énfasis sobre el método dialógico. ¿Qué pudiera ampliar sobre este método que considera usted tan importante?
Again, sort of the dialogic method is based on this idea that I want to understand you, my client. I want to bring myself in as in a most beneficial way, and I want to stick around and go through this process with you as my client, right? What I also mentioned in the article is a sort of a therapeutic attitude, I think, or dialogic attitude that I think is important. It has, in my way of thinking, it has to do with a certain kind of a respect for the human condition, that we're all born out of circumstances and enjoying and struggling with life in very particular ways. Right? And my assumption is my client has had their own valid way of, how can I say, making life work for themselves. And I have my own way of having done that, right? But even though I might not agree with my client's behavior or ways of thinking, or I don't understand their feelings yet, I need to respect those aspects of the client as something that we both need to understand more fully. If you try to override my client's thinking, or like making them feel that they feel something wrong or something like that, is not beneficial. Right? I need to engage I need to respect that the client's background that's brought them here is worthwhile to explore together and to understand better. And I think as a psychotherapist, we need to have a natural interest in how we become who we are as people in the world. Like, I need to be interested in this other universe that is my client, you know? And there needs to be a certain kind of a sense of care that we and that we're there somehow to help make things better if we can, you know. So that kind of attitude, I think, is in the background of what we're doing in the clinical situation. So each therapist, of course, they're coming to this work for some of their own reasons, right? And oftentimes when you talk about like new therapists, they want to learn to do certain thing. Okay, I want to learn how to do this and how to do that, or something like that. But it is because that makes them feel better or safer. Right? Mm-hmm. But eventually we need to understand that we also coming with a certain kind of a personal philosophy about life. Mm-hmm. And it's good to understand what that is, right? Because everything we're doing in psychotherapy is based on some notion of what is life is about and what is therapy all about, right? So,
bueno, qué rica esta conversación, porque siempre es bueno revisitar estos conceptos y perspectivas básicas y bueno, seguir reflexionando alrededor de todo esto. Así que muchísimas gracias y un abrazo desde Colombia.
Thank you very much too. I mean, I appreciate you doing this, and looking forward to see what comes out of it.
Bueno,
of course. So, thank you.
Yeah, muchas gracias por esta oportunidad.
Thank you, Danny.
Bueno, que esté muy bien. Hasta luego.
Okay. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.